right on it.
Looks like they're checking out. Pippin's going to be the...
Good morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church, Elizabethton. This morning's service is recorded and live stream broadcast on our church's YouTube channel, which can be found at fpcelizabethton.org.
In the name of the God who created us. In the name of the Christ who teaches us. In the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us throughout our lives, welcome home, children of God. Peace be with you.
And also with you.
Good morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church this morning as we gather together as God's people in God's name. It is wonderful to be here this morning. I welcome all of you here, whether you're joining us in person or online. Thank you for being here today. If you are here in person, if you just please sign those little blue friendship pads on the inside of the aisle, pass them down. If you are online, would you please sign in on the YouTube chat, and then after church today, we'll add up or tally up everybody who's in worship online or in person and give $1 to a different ministry for everybody in worship each Sunday. Today is a fourth Sunday of the month, so our recipient for today's Everyone Counts offering is Living Waters for the World. It's a joint ministry of Presbyterian churches throughout several states to provide solar-powered clean water filtration systems in communities all over the world, including some right here in Carter County. It's a great ministry, and showing up to church today you are helping to support the work that they do. So thank you for the gift of your presence. A couple of quick announcements. For those who knew or those who don't, member of the congregation, longtime member of the congregation, Dallas Moss, died earlier this week on Thursday morning. We don't have arrangement details yet. Her husband is still, and family are still working on those, but in the meantime, please keep Ray and the rest of Dallas's family in your prayers. And we'll communicate those logistics, those details for a service and celebration of her life once we have them. After church today, today we are, obviously as you go through the service, you'll see this, we are celebrating our labyrinth this morning. After service this morning, you'll have an opportunity to walk the labyrinth out back if you'd like, or just to go out back and see it and celebrate the dedication of a new peace pole. So logistics, we're going to kind of go through the service as we normally do with a few changes during the service, but then at the end, after we circle up and we sing our benediction, for those who would like to continue on to the labyrinth, if you'll just gather at the back door, and Aubrey will lead everybody around kind of the side of the church back to the labyrinth and continue back there. So we'll just do that kind of hopefully very smoothly from our circle to gathering back there and moving on. Any other announcements, joys, concerns? Suzanne? Thank you. Yes. Yeah, that was on my mind and then it just slipped right as I started doing these. Tomorrow evening, UKirk dinner at ETSU. You have all the casseroles and food and everything you need? Yes. So we're settled. Anything they need to know, or does everybody who's bringing food know what to do with it?
I think everybody's
okay.
got it set.
Excellent.
If there's anything else I need to pick up today, just let me know. It is 6 o'clock tomorrow.
6 o'clock tomorrow at the campus house at ETSU. And you are welcome to join for dinner and discussion afterwards. Russ Pearson's leading a worship service tomorrow evening, so it'd be a good chance to interact with some ETSU students. UKirk will also be here in 2 weeks, so we're glad to kind of have that partnership with them. But tomorrow night, we get to eat with them. So, yeah, thank you, Suzanne. Other announcements, joys, concerns? Okay, then we begin our worship service as we do every week by celebrating the gospel around which we gather, and that is the reminder that God loves all of us and all people everywhere, without condition and without exception. And that includes all of us in our unique and beautiful diversity, sexual and gender identities, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, straight, male, female, non-binary, our unique and diverse racial and ethnic identities, black, brown, white, Asian, indigenous. It includes us wherever we are on our spiritual journey, looking for wisdom in the Christian tradition, in other religious traditions, in science, and the world around us. It includes all people, rich and poor, young and old, able-bodied and disabled, suffering and rejoicing. For God's love welcomes and embraces all people everywhere, without condition and without exception. Welcome, God's beloved community. We give thanks for the ancestral Cherokee land on which we are gathered, for the loving waters of the Watauga and Doe River watersheds that nourish us. We commit ourselves today and at all times to work for truth and reconciliation among all peoples, to respect each other and creation around us in everything we say and do. So let's worship.
Invitation to worship is called The Maze by William Cowper. And please join me for the lines that are in bold print. From right to left and to and fro, caught in a labyrinth you go, and turn and turn and turn again to solve the mystery, but in vain. Stand still and breathe, and take from me a clue that soon shall set you free. Not Ariadne, if you met her, herself could serve you with a better. You entered easily, find where, and make with ease your exit there. Join us for our first hymn, number 30.
please stand and sing with us, number 30, if anyone will.
So, as all stories evolve over time, so has our church labyrinth story. I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. It all began at our annual retreat held at Roan Mountain State Park Conference Center on July 22nd, 2000. 24 years ago, the seed was planted. Annette Reynolds, the founder of the Labyrinth Project of Alabama, an international labyrinth speaker, came and shared her journey with the labyrinth. She facilitated an insightful day-long workshop about labyrinths and their use in healing and insight. During the workshop and walking the full-size canvas labyrinth that was spread on the floor of the conference center, many of the participants at this church and friends had profound experience as they walked that labyrinth that day. During that fall, conversations began about constructing a permanent labyrinth in our back lawn of the church. Our evolutionary timeline continued. 2001. My husband Jim and I attended an international labyrinth gathering in Atlanta, where we met Lauren Artress to discuss our church's plans. And Lauren Artress has been one of the founders of the labyrinth movement across the world. And she was at this conference, which was very inspiring. And we talked with her about what we were thinking about doing. During that year, a Labyrinth Memorial Fund was set up. In 2002, preliminary plans were discussed. The site was discussed, and moving at that time we had a daycare located downstairs in what is now Martin Hall. And so there was a playground in the back lawn where the labyrinth is today that we needed to make sure there was space for the children to play, not only our church children, but the community daycare center. So we moved the playground center over to the side of the yard, and we cleared that area for the labyrinth. In 2003 to 2005, there was a transition from John Martin's ministry to the arrival of John Shuck. And Katie and Pippa are here today. So we focused our matters at hand about just making this transition and our pastoral search. In 2007, after John Shuck had arrived, people asked, what about the labyrinth? What are we going to do? Are we going to go forward with the labyrinth in the back lawn? So the session discussed it. We made up a plan, and they approved our moving forward. We had stepping stone workshops where people made stepping stones, and I think that's something that we could do again. Many of them are recessed and they need a little bit of work out there, but we had labyrinth stepping stone workshops. And Frank Nicely, who was an architect here at our church and a wonderful harmonica player as well, and I began a collaborative effort of design and geometry. I had sketched out a design on a piece of graph paper, and with his ingenuity and his sacred geometry, he was able to put the design to a working drawing and allowing for the measurements to incorporate wheelchairs for handicap accessibility. In 2008, Frank Nicely took that design I had drawn up in 2002 and put its sacred geometry, engineering, and artistry to producing our blueprint. So in 2008, in May, we blessed the space, which had been doused. Ginger helped us with that to orient it for north, south, east, and west, and we broke ground. The sod was removed and relocated in the bare spots in the lawn. So we didn't discard it, we would just take a chunk of it, and if there was a hole, we would relocate it there and water it in. The site was doused, our 4 directions were located, and measured for handicap accessibility. We leveled and re-leveled numerous layers of granulated surface. We lined the paths and perimeter with rocks donated by the Rogers family. We installed the stepping stones, and we planted monkey grass, and hostas were donated by members of the congregation. The hostas have not done real well. I think the monkey grass has kind of squeezed them out a bit, but there's a hosta at the north, east, south, and west markings. We installed a post and an information box for walkers to use. In 2008, in September, it was completed, and in October of 2008, the labyrinth was dedicated. 3 years later, we installed our first peace pole at the labyrinth. And over the years, since 2011, the woodpeckers on site had damaged our wooden peace pole. So today we're going to be dedicating the new peace pole and have a labyrinth walk. So we've had many walks as a congregation since 2011, and stories have been told of neighborhood mothers strolling their babies on the labyrinth. That's actually been seen from the windows of the church, and toddlers gleefully following behind and in front of them. Today we will conclude our worship service at the labyrinth, where we will be dedicating our new peace pole as we celebrate this day of international peace. Thank you.
This morning at 7:45, the sun crossed the celestial equator going south, and we experienced the time when day and night are equal. The autumnal equinox marks the beginning of autumn. Traditionally, it's a time to honor the harvest. We celebrated Harvest Moon last week, a time that inspires us to reflect and express gratitude for the abundance in our lives. As we move away from the light, it also affords us a time to consider what we want to move forward in our lives and identify what we want to leave in the past. In autumn, nature is aging gracefully. Well, this time of autumn, nature is aging gracefully and releasing summer's bounty. Later on in autumn, the leaves all have a mind of their own, and we just let them play, thank goodness. Equinox represents balance, a moment when light and dark are in balance and in harmony, offering a unique time for reflection and introspection. It's a time of balance and transition as we move towards the darkness. Please stand as you're able or want to and face the east, which is that way. Observe your breath and listen to the beating of your heart, the beating of the drum. Take your time and feel your breath as it brings oxygen into your body, and let go of what you don't need as you exhale. Breathe. Feel the breath of the east as the first light flows over you. You are the air, the morning star, the first bird songs of day, inspiration, and the season of spring. Spirit of the East, bless us with your presence. And now take a quarter of a step and face the south. Feel the South's warm presence. It is the place of creativity and abundance. It's the place of play and children. Take a moment to send out your gratitude for all of the abundance in your life. Say thank you to Earth, which has provided your sustenance. Spirit of the South, bless us with your presence. And now take a quarter of a turn and face the west. Taste the tears of change in the watery west. The west is where our sun sets. It is the home of water. It is the home of autumn, introspection, and the courage of becoming. Spirit of the West, bless us with your presence. And now take a quarter turn and face the north. Feel the cold nipping at your toes. Mighty winter, deep cold, sage knowledge. Spirits of the north, bless us with your presence. And now you already are back in where we were facing. Stay right where you are. Mother Earth, great cosmic mother, put your arms around us and guide us as we become comfortable with the darkness that comes. Help us leave behind the things we don't need anymore. Help us plant seeds for the dream time and nurture them through the dark. Help us find a surer path, a truer path, and walk with us on this journey. Blessed be.
Our reading is from Philippians 4, verses 8 and 9. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. And in addition, from Catherine M. Valenti, a labyrinth, when it is big enough, is just the whole world.
As Brian mentioned, we have adjusted our service this morning, and as you can see, we are going to sing together this morning for our anthem. You're a part of that. And I'm asking you to turn your hymnals to number 737. And if there's ever a prayerful song, I do believe this is one of them. So I'm going to ask you to stand. As the choir starts this out and sings it, I'll be bringing you in on the third verse, and you can follow me at that point, if you will, pretty please. Listen to the words, the melody, the beauty of what this song says. Please stand.
It was a beautiful rendition this morning. Elaine, Lucinda, thank you for our meditation, and Aubrey, thanks for the labyrinth history this morning. Where is Aubrey? There's Aubrey. I was like, Pat, thanks for reading this morning too. I'll start with a story that wasn't part of what I wrote, but Wallace and I went this morning, as we do every Sunday morning, to pick up donuts at the Dunkin' Donuts. If you haven't discovered them, they're always in the back hall there for anybody that's here early. Grab a donut and enjoy. And I was chatting with the young woman behind the counter this morning, and she happened to mention that she didn't like donuts. And I said, that's probably a good thing since you're working at Dunkin'. And I'd mentioned how when I was in high school, I worked at the cookie factory in the mall. We made those, kind of big birthday cookies you probably had or something. And I was going to say, my point in sharing that story was I did not dislike cookies, and it was probably to my detriment for working there. And I mentioned that, and she looked at me and she said, that place has been around that long? So, yeah. She realized what she said and turned beet red, and of course, I thought it was funny, and we laughed about it a little bit. But my sermon this morning started with recollection of something that happened in high school, and I will share also books have been around that long, in case you were not aware. There are several things still in existence that have been around since my high school days. My sophomore year of high school, my English class did a unit in classics. We read all kind of stuff that I hated, Oedipus Rex, Antigone, the Odyssey, and just because they were difficult to get through, it's not the stories weren't fascinating, but as a, 15 or so, your sophomore year, it was hard to wade through that stuff. But I do remember we had a book, and I don't remember the name of it, but I remember the title or the cover of it. It was white with kind of an orangish Greek drama mask on it, and we read stories from there, and one of them was the story of the labyrinth. And it was my first, or at least first time I recall encountering that story. If you don't remember it, I will share at least just some highlights of that story. There was this beast that was part bull, part man, the Minotaur. And the Minotaur was kind of a curse sent by Poseidon, the god of the seas, to haunt King Minos for trying to deceive him. And the Minotaur's diet consisted pretty much entirely of the people of Crete and Athens. The citizens didn't love the risk of being eaten just because their king wanted to hang on to a prized bull that had been promised to Poseidon, but that was the curse of the Minotaur. And so after several kind of generations of this happening, King Minos enlisted the architect Daedalus to build an elaborate labyrinth maze to contain the Minotaur. And every 9 years, Minos made Aegeus, the king of Athens, send 7 young men and 7 young maidens into the labyrinth. If they escaped the labyrinth, they got to live. If they didn't, they became the Minotaur's dinner. Spoiler alert, they never escaped. The labyrinth was so challenging to navigate that Daedalus himself, the architect who designed it, almost didn't find his own way back out. We read that story in high school, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes, but about a decade or so after that sophomore English class, Sarah and I, in 1999, Sarah and I were in Germany in the spring of that year. She was taking classes, I was working on my master's thesis, and had some time during the day often to go explore while she was in class. And one particular day, I was flipping through a guidebook and looking for something to do, and I came across this story of a small church in a little village called Kirchzarten. It was about a 30-minute bus ride away from where we were staying, and I decided to check it out for the day. At that point, all I really remembered about labyrinths was having read a decade earlier the story of the Minotaur. So I ride the bus, and I, get dropped off and walk a couple blocks to the church, and I go in looking for something like the labyrinth of Greek myth. I was a little bit disappointed when I walked into a church there, made my way out to the backyard, and there was just this little maze kind of on the ground. It was so easy to figure out your way in and out of it. It was even less challenging than the mazes in the highlights books or highlights magazines I remember as a kid. Like you just look at it, you see how to get in and get out. I remember leaving the church and so 15, I guess I was around 25 at the time, 26. Left the church a little disappointed, found my way to a beer garden, spent the rest of the day, and that's probably not important to the story, but that was, I'm thinking, well, that was kind of a letdown. I was expecting something more akin to like the corn maze that we could find at Fender's Farm, not this little thing on the ground. Anyway, a decade or so, well, in fact, right at a decade after that, in the spring of 2009, Dad and I made a trip to Ireland and Scotland. It was a couple of years before he died. His Alzheimer's was already kind of advanced at that time. It was the last trip Dad and I got to make together. And one evening of that trip, we were in Dublin. We were staying at a little bed and breakfast, and we'd gone out and explored for the day. We had dinner. We got back there, and Dad wanted to turn in. I was kind of restless. I needed something to do, and I talked to the really sweet woman who was our host at the bed and breakfast. And she said she'd keep an eye on him just to make sure he didn't, leave and wander off, and I could go out and explore. So I did, and I caught a bus into downtown Dublin and just start walking around. And one of the places that was still open that evening was a church, and I don't remember which one, but I remember walking in, and right there in what would be our narthex, the kind of the entryway into the church, there was a labyrinth. And it was inlaid in stone into the floor of the church. And I just kind of started walking, wandering in and out. And all I kind of remember about that is I just started to reflect. I started to think about my dad and our time together. I started to reflect on my own mortality and on Dad's. I thought about, so Wallace had just had his first birthday, and I started to think about what kind of dad I wanted to be to him and what kind of dad my dad was to me. And all of that just kind of overwhelmed me as I walked in and out of that labyrinth back and forth for I honestly don't know how long, until one of the deacons of the church came over and just kind of interrupted me and said, I'm sorry, sir, we've got to close up now. So I made my way out and headed back to the bed and breakfast and went to bed for the night. I'll come back to that. After years of living in fear of the Minotaur, Theseus, the son of King Aegeus, vowed that he was going to put an end to the threat of the Minotaur. And so he volunteered to be one of the young men who went into the maze to try and find his way out. So Theseus, 6 other young men, 7 young maidens, boarded the boat to sail from Athens to Crete. He set sail from there with a black sail hoisted on the ship. The black sail was to symbolize mourning for the death of those 14 young people that were being sent into the labyrinth. But Theseus promised his father that if he should by chance be successful in defeating the Minotaur and escaping the labyrinth, he would change the color of the sails from black to white on his way home so that when his father, King Aegeus, saw the ship coming back and the sails were white, he knew his son had survived. Well, Theseus, as it turns out, gets to Crete with the help of a young woman named Ariadne. You might recall her name from the poem that Pat read this morning. Ariadne helped Theseus smuggle in 2 things into the labyrinth when he went in to battle the Minotaur. She helped him get a sword and a ball of twine into the maze. The sword so he would have a weapon with which to fight the Minotaur. And the ball of twine, you can probably imagine, was to leave himself a trail as he went into the labyrinth to find his way back out. Theseus was, in fact, victorious, slayed the Minotaur, followed the twine back out. And he was so elated in his victory and in such a hurry to get back to Athens and share the good news with all the people of Athens and with his father of the Minotaur's defeat that he forgot to change the color of the sail from black to white and hoist the white sail up. His father sees the ship approaching, still has the black sail hoisted. Aegeus, knowing what the black sail meant, that his son had died in the labyrinth, was so overcome, so stricken with grief, that he cast himself into the sea. That is, by the way, where the Aegean Sea gets its name from. King Aegeus threw himself into the sea, overwhelmed with grief for the loss of his son, who, of course, was not dead. Theseus took over his father's throne. He became the king of Athens. But the legends and the stories around that recount how Theseus changed in that journey. Went from being a young lad going out to fight to coming home, having to deal with his grief over the death of his father, having to rise up to being the king of Athens, even though that wasn't the thing that he wanted to do. And that story is depicted in art and pottery and paintings through centuries since. You can find hints of it in labyrinths, even though it's Greek mythology, you can find hints of it in church labyrinths around churches and gardens and stories and pathways. With the idea that it was this journey, this entering in and coming back out of the labyrinth. It wasn't the thing that changed Theseus in itself, but it was the backdrop for his transformation. His kind of moving from being a young man to taking over in place of his father after his death. Now, if you go out back after the service and walk the labyrinth, it's going to look a lot more like the one I saw in that church in Dublin, the one in Kirksarten, than it is like the one of Daedalus's creation there on Crete. Because the purpose of these labyrinths, and honestly probably the one in Crete as well, it's not to trap us. It's not to make us lose our way. It is an opportunity to walk a path in the hopes of finding something. So there is no right or wrong way to enter in or walk out of the labyrinth in the backyard. You're probably not going to run into a minotaur back there. I'm not going to make that promise, but the chances are rather slim. A lot of times, less so now, but more when he was younger, Wally and I would often end up at fall festivals, birthday parties or things that would have a corn maze at them. People like to go to Fender's Farm or, all the other corn mazes and things like that. And I love doing those. I've always been drawn to those kind of mazes because they have, to me, what felt like a very distinct purpose. One solution. You find your way in, you find your way out, you've solved a problem, you can check that off the list, and it's done. I know I didn't appreciate that first encounter with the labyrinth in Germany in Kirksarten in 1999. The one in Dublin in 2009 was transformative for me. I felt very much like I think Theseus, taking that walk, wrestling with the loss of my own dad, and what that meant for me to kind of no longer have a male relative older than me, but to be the oldest male relative in my family. That kind of movement, it was transformative. And the purpose of the labyrinth is not to find your way in and out. It's to walk and see what you notice on the journey. You don't have to have a labyrinth to do that, of course. You can do that walking around your neighborhood. You can do it walking to your car this morning. But there's a long tradition, not just within Christianity, long before that, in Greek mythology, in the Christian tradition, in other traditions, of the journey itself being transformative. The journey itself being the thing that can help to open our eyes to see something in ourselves and in the world that is worth noticing. And so it's not something we walk to get an answer, to find our way back out. It's a journey we're invited to take part and see what we notice. So whether you do that walking the labyrinth or walking some other way, I invite you to, next time you find yourself walking around, open your eyes and see what you notice. See how God might be speaking to you in that journey. And sometimes maybe that becomes a transformation. Blessed be. Amen. Let me invite us to stand and walk the short journey up to the table if you have an offering you want to share. But otherwise, just stand and we'll sing together our doxology this morning. Benediction today before we circle up, so.
This is a poem from Melissa Gale West in her book, Exploring the Labyrinth. Consider this. Whoever you are, walking the labyrinth has something to offer. If a project is challenging you, walking can get your creative juices flowing. When struggling with grief or anger or a physical challenge or illness, walking the labyrinth can point the way to healing and wholeness. If you're looking for a way to meditate or pray that engages your body as well as your soul, the labyrinth provides such a path. When you just want reflective time away from a busy life, the labyrinth can offer you a time out. The labyrinth holds up a mirror, reflecting back to us not only the light of our finest selves, but also whatever restrains us from shining forth.
Let me invite us to circle up as we do each Sunday. The words for our benediction are in your bulletins if you need them, and we will offer a blessing to each other as we part. If you do wish to walk the labyrinth today out back with others, after we sing, just gather at the back door and we'll make our way out there.